Oh god, this is gonna be a good episode. Here we go.
Yep.
Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I am your host, as always, Coach Steve. With me today, we have Coach John. What is going on, brother?
Nothing much. Just another beautiful day in Southwest Florida. Excited for my Patriots tonight. So it's a good Thursday. It's a great Thursday to be alive.
Yeah, I'm actually rooting for the Patriots to actually win this game, hopefully tonight. So we'll see what happens. It's definitely going to be a good division matchup. We'll see. Hopefully it provides us with some good fantasy, that's for sure. There's a lot of players that I'm sure a lot of people have on both sides of the ball. So we'll see what happens. But we are talking starts and sits for week 13, guys. We are 2 short weeks away from the playoffs. And this week is also important because next week is that big week, 16 bye next week. So getting a win here this week, I'm sure will help a lot of fantasy owners out. So that's what we're going to do today, guys. And no Coach Gibbs today. He's at a wedding today, but he'll be back next Monday for our week 14 shows. And we'll go from there. So let's get into some news. It's not a ton of things to talk about, but let's get into some news real quick. All right, guys. So in terms of those who did not practice this Thursday, and usually Thursdays, and mostly an indication where you're either going to play or not kind of play situation here. Usually when you don't practice on Thursday, it doesn't always help your case. But again, there's a few situations where people still play. But a couple guys who did not practice today: Jarrett McKinnon, Kadarius Toney, Antonio Gibson, Rex Burkhead, Deebo Samuels, Treylon Burks, Jawan Johnson, Najee Harris, David Njoku, Jerry Jeudy, Russell Wilson, and also Cam Akers did not practice today. All these guys did not practice. Some of them are due to the big spread of right now of the flu that's going around. Apparently, it's getting a lot of people sick because I see a lot of the injury reports saying illness. So I'm assuming it's a lot of flu-like symptoms that they're dealing with right now. And again, that could end up impacting big. Apparently, the flu is a really big thing right now. It's hurting a lot of people. So we'll see what happens here. Any name you want to mention out here, John, before we move on?
No, I think all of these names, at least from the reports that I've read, I think all of these names are highly questionable to play. So if you have any of these people in your lineup, you're banking on any of these people to play, I would try and pivot and then wait until Sunday's reports come out. And if you get lucky and David Njoku gets to go or Kadarius Toney gets to go, you make the decision there. But I wouldn't plan on any of these guys suiting up come Sunday.
Right. And I think we're, at the end, I think we're going to talk about some of their backups if we obviously don't mention them in the show, and then kind of go from there at the end of the episode. So if you want to hear more about these guys, we're going to wait until then. I don't want to spoil anyone's sleepers or busts on either side of us. So we'll wait till the end on that. And of course, if anyone enters our chat over on the YouTube channel or Facebook, please post some fantasy questions and we'll be happy to answer them for you guys. So let's get into the first topic of the day here. We'll get rid of that. Sleepers and busts, and I have a new thing to add into the show here. Just a little bit of quarterback matchups. Now,
love it.
Yes, thank you. I do this every single week as it is anyway, so I figured why not give a little added bonus to those who watch the show live. Some other players we might not get to, obviously, because we can't talk about everybody. So basically what I do for this, guys, is I go through the teams who are allowing the most fantasy points per game to certain positions and obviously the least. Now, this obviously changes as we get to this part of the season because defenses get better, defenses get worse. And so it kind of gives you a little bit of take on both sides of the ball. So if we don't get to them, these are some other good starts on, and I'm going to go through all of the positions here. So, John, we'll start with our sleeper quarterback first. Who do you have at your super QB position?
So my sleeper QB is Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence just came off a monster game, throwing for 300, 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. That offense is finally starting to click. They're finally starting to figure it out. I think, the kind of evolution of Trevor Lawrence has been fun to watch over the past, half a season. He also get a great matchup against Detroit, who's 32nd against quarterbacks, dead last in the league. So it is a great matchup. The last 3 weeks, the Detroit Lions have led up 26 points to the quarterback position in all 3 weeks. At least 26 points. You have Justin Fields in there who had an absolute monster day, but you got Daniel Jones in there who threw for a bunch of touchdowns, ran one in, had 29 points. So, they are obviously a very beatable defense. I think this could be a higher scoring game. And I love Trevor Lawrence this week. I love all the pieces. I think without Travis Etienne, they're going to have to throw. This is a matchup that you're kind of waiting for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, no, I think Trevor Lawrence is a really good play this week as well. He's been playing a little bit better as of late, and the Lions defense, especially in the passing game, still can't find a way to stop anybody. So should be a really good game for Trevor Lawrence. We do have a question in the chat, though, from Trey. What's going on, Trey? Full point PPR, Juwan Johnson or Dawson Knox? Obviously, this is for a Thursday night game, obviously, because Knox is playing tonight. So how do you feel about this situation here? Do you feel like it's on Juwan Johnson, who's been on fire, or Knox, who we'll get to it eventually, but does have a good matchup?
I think it's tough. I think it's tough when you have – I get it. You want to start Knox, but it's hard when you have all these pieces going on a Thursday night game. Again, I like the Patriots defense. I think it's a tough matchup, both on the ground and through the air. So, you're relying on a lot of yardage between Diggs and Knox. So it limits your upside because they're obviously not both going to score touchdowns on a single drive. So it's hard because I love the offense of the Bills, but I would probably lean Juwan Johnson. I would stay in the flames and ride Juwan Johnson out.
And honestly, that's definitely not a bad call to make. Obviously, he's just been on fire lately. He didn't practice today, though, so there is some concern with that. But I feel like he presents that high touchdown upside. And if you're looking for a high touchdown upside, I think Juwan Johnson is the way to go. I think I prefer Dawson Knox personally. I think he's just been a little bit more consistent as of late for fantasy. He has 15 targets over the last 3 games, which isn't terrible for a tight end, especially in his position there. And the Patriots have been bad at tight end. So I would go Knox just for the safe floor. But if you're looking for upside, I think John makes perfect sense going with Juwan Johnson for sure. And then we have another question from Trey. Start 2 full point PPR. Travis Etienne, Jeff Wilson, Rachaad White, or Lenny. Lastly, obviously, Tua or Dak.
So I don't think it doesn't sound like Travis Etienne is going to play. You got to keep an eye on Lenny because he might not play either. So therefore, your answer's set for you. You got Jeff Wilson and Rachaad White, and then between Tua and Dak, they're both kind of same quality, top 10 plays. I just love the upside of Tua because he has Waddle, he has Tyreek, and he could throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns pretty easily. It's so
right.
I would probably go with Tua, and then in the running back room, I would just pay attention to injuries because your answer might be given to you. But if assuming everyone's healthy, assuming you're kind of running everyone, I would probably go Rachaad White and Etienne, but I don't think Etienne plays this week. So you're going to be not like you're stuck. Jeff Wilson's still pretty good. So,
exactly.
So you're going to have to start Jeff Wilson, but
we're going to talk about it in a little bit, unfortunately. So
I'll just keep an eye on practice reports. It's really hard. I know Etienne sat out again. Lenny is still day to day. So just keep an eye out.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. Tua is the way for me for sure. And I think Rachaad White, and then like John said, Etienne if he plays. If not, just go with Jeff Wilson. If Lenny and White play, I would consider starting both of those over Jeff Wilson this week personally. But I understand not starting 2 RBs from the same positions for sure. So, but yeah, I think you're pretty much set on either way. The injury reports will kind of break everything down for your trade at some point. So, and you're very welcome. All right, so back to my quarterback sleeper this week, and his name is shown up on this list here, and it's Michael Whatevs, even though it's supposed to be Mike White. Mike White, man, he just lit it up last week against the Bears, and I know it was the Bears, so let's not take it too much with a grain of salt. But the Vikings actually allowed the most passing yards all season to quarterbacks, and they've allowed the 6th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. The Vikings have allowed 2+ touchdowns in 5 of their last 6 games, 300-yard game in 4 of the last 6 games. Mike White comes in with that swagger mentality. I think someone said that Brett Favre swag, even though I know he's not Brett Favre, but he's got the elite wide receivers around him, and there should be absolutely no reason why, if you're looking for a sleeper kind of quarterback, he makes a ton of sense in this matchup where you could expect it maybe potentially be a high-scoring game, but in general, I mean, I think they're going to use that passing offense with the running back kind of just depleted right now. So Mike White is my sleeper quarterback of the week.
That's a great one. That's a great one. I like it. I like it a lot. And we'll get to it when we get to some other players, but I'm in on the Jets this week.
Absolutely. 100%. I love it. All right. So let's go to quarterback busts here. John, who do you give your QB bust of the week?
My QB bust of the week is going to be Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is playing Philly. Philadelphia is number 1 against quarterbacks in the position. They've no quarterback this entire season, which I thought was crazy. I had to look up the stats and just vet it, and it's true. No quarterback has scored more than 18 points against the Philadelphia Eagles this year. So you're not going to get this high scoring game. I think they're going to have to run the ball a ton. I think it goes through Derrick Henry. I'm not starting Treylon Burks. I don't like any really of the passing options there. So I think maybe you see, 150 yards passing and no touchdowns. Like that's horrible. That's gonna crush you this week. So I think, Ryan Tannehill is a kind of a clear sit.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. Obviously, he's on the sheet here. It says sit on it, so I absolutely agree with that there for sure. I can't wait for you to be the opposite of one of my picks here. So I can't wait. So, but yeah, makes perfect sense to sit Ryan Tannehill this week, even though he's been coming off 2 fantastic performances. So love that pick there. For my quarterback bust this week, I'm going with Deshaun Watson. It's his first game back in almost 2 years now. I know it's against Houston and the hype they're bringing up for this, but Houston has been really good in the air. They allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game. In just 3 of the 8 games this season here, over the last 8 games, 3 of the last 8 games, they've allowed just 2 quarterbacks to throw 2 touchdown passes plus, and only 3 of them of the last 8 games. But this is a situation where it's going to be a Nick Chubb game. I can't see the Cleveland Browns allowing Deshaun Watson to throw for 35 plus times in this game here. And I just don't see it happening. The offense hasn't been so great in the passing offense. I think this is a game where he gets 25 attempts and maybe he gets 200 some yards. I don't know if he gets 2+ touchdowns or anything like that. I think this is the day where Nick Chubb just runs all over them and ends up having the best fantasy week this coming week for RBs. So for me, I'm avoiding Deshaun Watson. I know you might want to start him because you've been holding on to him this long, but it's a risky start for me, and I prefer to avoid him and go with someone who I have more confidence in this, especially in the first game back. So
yeah, I agree. Deshaun Watson is a good name because 700 days since he last played competitive NFL football. So that's a long time, man. It's going to take at least a couple weeks for him to get up to speed, for him to get his motions, his mechanics. It's all this little nuances of the game. Not saying he can't do it. He can do it. He's a talented player, but there's a lot that goes on in an NFL game that you need to, it's just different than when you're sitting on the sidelines or when you're in practice or when you're doing all these other things. And so I think he really could struggle for a couple weeks before we start to see this Browns offense and Deshaun Watson explode the way we expect.
Right. Exactly. That's a great way to put it. All right, let's get over a tight end bust now at this point. Tight end sleepers. I'm sorry. Tight end sleepers this week, John. Who do you have as a tight end sleeper this week?
So I had one, but he didn't practice today, and that's David Njoku. So I'm pivoting. I have a second one, and that's Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett is playing Las Vegas. Great matchup. Everyone loves it. Las Vegas stinks. They've given up the 6th most fantasy points per game to tight end. And then in week 1, last time he faced them, he went 3 for 54 and a touchdown. So, he has beaten Las Vegas this year. He has shown flashes of big games with this offense. I don't know if Mike Williams is coming back. So again, he's going to be pretty necessary. Target, C5 plus targets, which you love in the tight end position. And he's got a good percentage chance to score. So again, once you get past the top 2-3 tight ends, in my opinion, you're just looking for a touchdown. So I love Gerald Everett to score this week.
Yeah, no, I like that there a lot. I think Jared Everett should be a pretty strong matchup this week overall. I don't think Mike Williams is playing just yet. I think there's going to be another 2 weeks or so before he gets back on the field. So gives another opportunity to see Gerald Everett to see those targets for sure. For my sleeper this week, I went back with Foster Moreau, and I feel like he's been having not great success, but he's having these favorable matchups, and he did just enough last week to keep himself relevant, which gives me enough confidence this week to actually play him again. They play in the Chargers, the division matchup. I expect this to be another high-scoring game. The Chargers have allowed the third most yards to tight ends this season. Not a lot of touchdowns, and that's the one thing that does slightly scare me, but I feel like this is a week where I think they get Foster Moreau kind of back on track after kind of being kind of taken down or shut down last week. And again, high-scoring game. I expect Derek Carr to be throwing this ball a lot, especially if Josh Jacobs doesn't play. I don't know if I trust their run game enough to allow somebody on the ground 20-plus carries. So I think they might throw the ball just a little bit more this week, and I think Foster Moreau kind of gets back on track for you in fantasy. So
yeah, I think that's a great call.
I
think that's a great call.
Tight end sleeper this week. All right, let's go to the tight end bust now. Who do you have as a tight end bust this week, John?
So the tight end bust I have is kind of, again, feels like cheating. It's kind of an obvious one, but it's Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet, was kind of left for dead for the first 4 or 5 weeks. Had this huge resurgence as Justin Fields kind of emerged into the superstar. And, now you get Trevor Siemian as your quarterback. So it is purely because Justin Fields probably isn't going to play and they're going to throw the ball 23 times. And so they're back to what they looked like in the first couple weeks, which, you're going to get 3 targets for 12 yards. It's like, all right, I don't care about this again. So, again, as long as Justin Fields is out, I'm not starting Claypool. I'm not starting Cole Kmet. I think it's just going to revolve around David Montgomery and that's it. And they're just going to, the Bears aren't in it to win games. They're not in it at this point in the season. They're just going to grind it out and look to 2023. So it sucks. Chicago fans, Bears fans, I'm sorry, but as long as Justin Fields is out, you guys don't, even with Justin Fields in, you don't have much of a chance, but even with Justin Fields out, you definitely don't have a chance.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely torn on Cole Kmet because I do love him so much, and maybe assume that Mooney gives him some more targets, but it just hasn't been pretty. And if I feel like this is a game where Fields is going to continue to run the ball often, and if not, I don't know if I trust Trevor Siemian. And I think he's even practiced Trevor Siemian, so it could be another quarterback like Nathan Peterman or something again this week. So definitely don't have that trust factor overall. So we'll see what happens. It all depends on the injuries at quarterback. So my tight end bust this week, guys, is Robert Tonyan. Robert Tonyan has kind of been a no-show over the last 3 games, just 8 targets in the last 3 games now combined. Definitely not looking good as he's not being barely much involved in this offense. It's the Watson show. There's a chance that Romeo Doubs could come back this coming week here. So I just don't see Robert Tonyan having a big game. The Bears allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends this coming season. I know they allowed Tyler Conklin to have 50 yards last week, but it just doesn't seem like Robert Tonyan is involved that often. And if they switch to Jordan Love, I don't know who he's going to favor more if it's not even the tight end position. So, and you're going to have, if Rodgers plays, I mean, he's just not 100%. So it's really hard to trust Robert Tonyan in a matchup like this. So I'm avoiding him at all costs this week.
I'm gonna go on record now and say I don't think Aaron Rodgers plays. I just don't. I don't. I think he's banged up. He's older. The team has nothing to play for. It's just I can't imagine he's going out there less than 100%. So he's. We know where he's at in his career. He's squeezing blood out of a stone at this point. So I just think you got banged up ribs. He's not gonna put his body through that. So I have a feeling we're gonna see Jordan Love, and I totally agree. I don't want anything to do with Robert Tonyan.
Right, I like it. All right, so let's get over to our RB sleepers now. Yes, RB sleepers here now, John. So give us your first RB sleeper of the week.
Switch to my other page. My first RB sleeper is Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren was just full participant in practice again. He was held out last week due to a hamstring injury, but it looks like Najee Harris is probably going to be out. And we saw a lot of Benny Snell. We saw a lot of what's his name, the other kid, McFarland. I think that they're looking for any sort of spark in that backfield. And when Jalen was out there, he provided a little bit of a spark. He showed that he had some speed to him. He had some elusiveness. Atlanta is 23rd against running backs and allowing and Jaylen Warren had 10 plus PPR points for the 2 games before he was injured. So he was starting to sort of get a little bit of relevance as it was, even with Najee in there. And now you're telling me Najee's going to be out and it's going to be him and Benny Snell. I got to assume Jaylen Warren is going to get the primary role in that backfield. So I love him this week. I think he's a easy pick up and start if he's out on your waiver wire and you're kind of up against it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think whoever plays for the Steelers, I'm excited for this coming week. I mean, I don't know who it's going to be yet. We'll know as the injury reports come out later as we get closer to Sunday. But I do like anyone who's there for a good sleeper potential this week. Atlanta does allow a lot of fantasy points up, so I like that one there a lot, John. My first RB sleeper this week is Kyren Williams from the Los Angeles Rams. Now, he might be available on waivers to pick up, honestly. I don't think a lot of people went after him compared to the other guys on waivers this past week. But Williams has been better, probably the best running back I've seen on this team so far this season here. And it's weird to say that after all this time, but I mean, he had 70% of the snaps this week. He out-carried Cam Akers last week here. He's seeing the receiving work in the offense. Now, the offense is a mess. I get it. I understand that, but they do play Seattle this week. And Seattle, they allow the 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs this coming season here. And without the option at quarterback, I don't really see them throwing the ball a ton, especially if Bryce Perkins plays again. I mean, I don't really see them really throwing the ball 30 times in this game here. I think they're going to run the ball as much as they possibly can in a favorable matchup. And Williams, who has been basically splitting the carries work with Cam Akers and also seeing the receiving work, 3 or 4 targets a game since he's been back. It's a good start this week if you're looking for a sleeper at RB. If you might be short on RBs with due to all the injuries, I like Williams this week a lot.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I think again, Cam Akers is probably going to sit. The Rams don't have anything to play for. Cam Akers doesn't really have anything to play for, so he's not going to go out there unless he's 100%. So I think you could see a lot of Kyren Williams.
Exactly, and that helps the case that if Akers definitely doesn't play for sure. So. All right, John, back to you. Who's your second RB sleeper this week?
My second RB sleeper is someone who has really emerged over the past couple weeks, and it's Rachaad White. Rachaad White's coming off a 100-yard all-purpose game. We love to see it. Saw 9 targets. Love to see it. And there is a very strong chance Leonard Fournette is still out this week. Now, the only downside is on paper, you look at the matchup against New Orleans and you say to yourself, oh, their run D is ridiculous because they've always been. The past 5-6 years, they've been ridiculous. But if you look at it, they're really not that strong against pass-catching running backs. And so I think that, they're 17th against the running back position for fantasy. And when you factor in the passing game, that's where they tend to get beat. And so I think that Rachaad White could see another 8 targets in the passing game, get himself 50, 60 yards and a score. And then even if he gets 10, 15 carries and adds another 50 yards there, it's like you're looking at another 100 yards all purpose and a score. So I'm excited. I think Rachaad White is a strong play with Leonard Fournette out. Like I would put him in. He'd be a top 15 guy for me. Even with Leonard Fournette there, I'm still willing to flex Rachaad White.
Yeah, I was actually about to say that right at the end of your thing there. I was like, I'd still want to play White even with Leonard Fournette on the field because I think there's enough work for both these guys to see some good production in this week in a favorable matchup. So, and a division matchup, so they're going to have to use all the tools in their shop to win this game here. So I do like that a lot.
Yeah, Tampa Bay is in sort of must-win situations from here on out. They lost.
They don't have to do too much.
No. But the loss to Cleveland really hurt.
That
was one that you really let slip away.
Couple
sucks.
in the season.
Yeah, they've had a few, but yeah, you get they need to figure it out if they want to make a playoff push. And Tom really wants to, make a run at it and be a contender. They have to figure. This is the time. They have to figure it out now, because if you get another loss or two under your belt, you're probably second or third in the division, which then it's impossible for you to sort of fight back.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Okay, so my second RB sleeper this week is Brian Robinson. He had his big breakout game last week. He had the big hat on, everything. It was awesome.
Big hat.
The big hat. Wow, they were talking about that on podcast all week and how much it was. It was like $75. Like, what the fuck?
That's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous. It was ridiculous, 100%. But maybe people think this might have been a fluke game last week, and I don't know, it could be. But I think there's a potential for him to have another great game. Obviously, Antonio Gibson did not practice today because of a foot injury. So there's promise that him seeing a bigger workload is potentially there. I mean, he caught a receiving touchdown last week. It was wild. I didn't expect that out of him ever. But over the last 6 games, the Giants have allowed at least 7 running backs over 60 yards in a game during the season over these last 6 here now. And it seems like Robinson is going to continue to see at least 15 to 17 touches in a game on the ground at least. And maybe there's potential of a couple more with Antonio Gibson potentially out this week in a very favorable matchup for them. And a division matchup, which I think it's going to require them to be able to run the ball very well. So Brian Robinson, I'm accepting being able to put him back in flex lineups this coming week here. So
yeah, I love Brian Robinson. I don't think Antonio Gibson plays, so you're going to get as much work as you could possibly handle in that backfield. So it's going to be it might not be the most efficient, but he's going to score points because there's nowhere else to go with it. So I love him. I love him in DFS. He's cheap in DFS to sneak into your lineups right now. And I would set that up before the news cycle breaks about Antonio Gibson. And then, the price might go up and he'll be in everyone's lineups or whatnot. But I think it's an awesome play this week.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So let's get to our RB bust of the week here. John, who's your RB bust of the week?
The first RB bust is someone who I had been riding high on for weeks, and I think this is the week he really starts to let people down, and that's Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary is going against New England. New England is the number 1 rush defense in the league. They have only allowed Devin Singletary to score 1 touchdown in their 5 meetings together. So over Devin Singletary's entire career against New England, he has only scored once. So I just don't think this is a touchdown game for Devin Singletary. I think they're going to have to, New England's defense is beatable through the air a little bit. If you're going to beat them, you're going to try and put the ball in Josh Allen's hands. You're not going to put the ball in Devin Singletary's hands. So I think it's going to be 15 attempts for 30 yards and no score. So it's just not the game. Devin Singletary is very much a matchup dependent kind of play and a matchup dependent kind of guy. And this is the worst possible matchup. So I think Thursday night, good defense, all these things. So the only thing I will say, and this is just my only caveat, and the reason why I hesitated putting him on there is I don't think New England's offense can keep up with the Bills. So the Bills could get out to an early 14-point lead and just run the clock. And if that's the case, then Devin Singletary might make me eat my words, but I'm not predicting that. I think that would be an outlier of a situation.
Agreed. I think unless he scores a touchdown, I don't think whatever happens, he doesn't have a good day. So
yeah,
the way I see it. All right. So for my 1 RB bust of the week, I'm going with Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders has been fantastic this year, obviously. But when he doesn't score a touchdown, he really doesn't have a great fantasy performance. And the Titans have only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. They just allowed second one last week against Samaje Perine. And, the way that the Eagles offense is working is that, it's not just Sanders running the ball on the goal line every single time. They throw in Kenny Gainwell there as just as much as possible. He scored a touchdown last week. You actually had the first rushing touchdown away from them last week here. And they have also don't have a lot of yards to running backs, just the third fewest yards to running backs this coming season. I think this is a game where they really get, obviously, Jalen Hurts runs the ball and he throws the ball a ton, and the wide receivers are going to have a great week. And I don't think Miles Sanders ends up having that big performance as we obviously saw last week out of him. He saved my fantasy week in the league. But this week I'm trying to avoid if I can, or if you're going to lower your expectation, you're getting the 7 to 8 fantasy points instead of the 19 plus that he got us last week. So that's the way I kind of see Miles Sanders this coming week. So
Yeah, Tennessee, man, they're really surprising. The fact that their offense can't really do much outside of Derrick Henry, but they're winning games, which is crazy. So
Wow, how
I
they
think this
control that division.
I think this is going to be a believe it or not, I think this is going to be a pretty tough test for Philadelphia for them to um, go in, put up a ton of points and score, because Tennessee loves to control the clock. They love to keep things in their possession. And so, yeah, I agree. Miles Sanders is probably a sit as well. It all depends on who you got on your bench. But if you can sit him, sit him. If you can flex him, he's probably more in that flex territory than he is his standard high end RB2.
Right. That's kind of that's the best way to see it. I mean, I think this is going to be a game where Derrick Henry just eats against that middle of that defense that has been so bad. So I'm expecting that and a lot of clock to be drained. So, all right, let's get over to our wide receiver sleepers of the week, John. Here, who do you have as your first wide receiver sleeper?
I'm going rookies this week. I think the rookies are really going to start to emerge. I think we're really going to start to see some of these players come out in the second half of the season. And the number one guy who I loved in the pre-draft process, I love seeing him, play, and that's Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is phenomenal. He had an absolute monster day with Mike White. The Vikings give up the most points to perimeter wide receivers in the league. So if you are going to beat Vikings, it's to the outside. It's out wide. Mike White is playing, like we said, with some swagger. This I don't give a F mentality. I'm just going to chuck it up. I got nothing to lose. So I think that really helps the pass catchers. I think that really helps people like Garrett Wilson, who are awesome separators and great separators downfield. And he is the Vikings have also allowed 2+ passing touchdowns. And you said this stat, 2+ passing touchdowns in 5 of the last 6 games. So I think this is a Garrett Wilson touchdown week. And you hope you insulate that with a couple big plays and, maybe you get to 100 yards and a score.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that there. We're going to talk about somebody else on that team in a little bit, but no, it should be a really good game for Garrett Wilson. I'm putting him in most of my lineups this week because I feel like there's a great game coming from him this week for sure. So, all right. My first sleeper at wide receiver, I'm going with Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton hasn't really been that great over the last all season, but and I'm not saying definitely don't start Russell Wilson, but I think Courtland Sutton can do enough to get himself a really good fantasy week this week here. I don't think Russ needs to do all that much to make sure that he ends up having it. Courtland Sutton ends up having a good week. We saw last week that the Ravens got beat outside pretty often and early on. That's exactly where Courtland Sutton plays. He's a big physical guy, kind of like Zay Jones. Zay Jones is kind of a tall wide receiver here, and I expect that they're going to be behind in this game, Denver, and they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit. They're going to have to throw. I don't know if it's going to be great for Wilson, but I think there's going to be enough targets to go Courtland Sutton's way that he ends up having a really good fantasy day. So I'm going with Courtland Sutton. I think he ends up with 80 yards and a touchdown this coming week. He gets his second touchdown, just like Michael Pittman got his second touchdown last week. This is going to be a Courtland Sutton touchdown week for sure.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I have him written down as a sit. I think it's going to be a really tough matchup. I think this Ravens game is going to be very low scoring. I just think there is something wrong with the Broncos offense. You watch it and you watch Russell Wilson and you watch all these plays. They're just not on the same page. They're not connecting with anything. There's conversations around him losing the locker room and all this stuff. And it's just like, I think what the Broncos need is to, again, just get to the off season, just limp into the off season, clean house in terms of coaching and some other things, and try and, maybe bring in Schottenheimer or someone who Russell Wilson is comfortable with and can kind of get the yips out. But Courtland Sutton is always good for a big play. He's always a threat for a downfield play, but I just think that, you're going to see time of possession is really going to be in Baltimore's favor. And I just don't think the Broncos offense can move fast enough to be able to score. It's just going to be a hard game. I think it's, again, another 13-point outing from the Broncos, which is just brutal.
I have so many teams under 15 15
Oh,
points scored. It's so bad.
I heard a stat a couple weeks ago, and I want to see if it's still true, that if they had scored at least 18 points in all of their games, they'd be 8-1. And that was a few weeks ago when I heard this stat, and I went, man, that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. So
Can't win close games.
they can't win close games. They can't score points. It's just, it's just not the offense that we expected. And I think Jerry Jeudy being out doesn't help Courtland Sutton. I think Courtland Sutton is the type of receiver. He's a good receiver, but he's not the type of receiver that can, really take over a game and dominate double coverage and all that stuff. He needs things to operate well around him, and he can, break a play. I just think it's going to be I think it's just going to be tough sledding for Courtland Sutton.
Right.
For example, I would start Garrett Wilson 100%.
Oh,
over
100%, absolutely.
over a lot of these, a lot of these names that we have up here, these deep sleepers, even like a DJ Chark, Darius Slayton, Nico Collins, like some of these guys, like I would still start over Courtland Sutton. And it's too bad because, he is the number one and he should be better, but it's just that offense is so anemic right now.
Right, exactly. Well, hopefully we can only hope for the best. So,
well, listen, I hope he gets a big play for you.
I hope so. I needed a few leaks. So, all right. So, give us your second wide receiver sleeper there, John.
Second wide receiver, I'm going with another rookie, and that is George Pickens. George Pickens has had some good weeks. He hasn't had that real, in my opinion, he hasn't had that super breakout performance yet. I think he's just been steady. He's been consistent. But Atlanta has given up 13 touchdowns and the fourth most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. So, again, I think George Pickens we see him make these acrobatic catches, these crazy sideline catches, and, he's getting targeted in the end zone. So I think it's just a matter of time until everything comes together where he has this 100-yard game, a score, maybe 2 scores. A couple of weeks ago, he had just missed his second touchdown on the day by inches. So he is one of those guys who in my opinion, it's just a matter of time until he blows up for 20, 30 points and we're all going to be sitting there. And this could be that week against Atlanta without Najee Harris, probably going to throw the ball a lot. So I like George Pickens.
Yeah, no, I like George Pickens a lot too. If you can get me your starting lineup any which way, I would definitely try to the best you can. So I think this is going to be a big passing day here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, all right. Mm-hmm. So for my second wide receiver sleeper, I actually went with Corey Davis, to be honest.
Great one.
I mean, it might be a little bit more deeper sleeper, not a deep sleeper, but a deeper sleeper because, he hasn't really played that much over the last month. But last week was his first game back after an injury. And early on in the season, he looked good. He had, double-digit fantasy points in 3 of his first 4 games. And it wasn't with, obviously, Zach Wilson. Obviously, when he doesn't have another quarterback playing, he actually gets a little bit better. And I think this is a week where we mentioned already Mike White and this Jets offense here that they're going to be passing the ball a ton. And I expect Corey Davis to see more than 3 targets this coming week. I expect him to see more playing time this week as well and kind of get to that 7 to 8 target range and potentially a high scoring offense for the Jets this week where they're throwing the ball a ton because obviously the running back situation is a mess now. And I do like him a lot as a flexible option for you in fantasy. I think he could finish as a top 36 wide receiver pretty easily. So for me, that's my sleeper this week is Corey Davis.
Yeah, that's a great one. I was considering it. I felt, like I said, I felt kind of guilty going Garrett Wilson, but I liked the idea of having 2 rookies in my starts. But no, Corey Davis is great. I think in 2 wide receiver sets, you're going to see Corey Davis on the outside. We talked about how Minnesota loves to give up yards to the outside. So yeah, Corey Davis is, it's when Joe Flacco was in there, Corey Davis was a very usable asset. He was a very, top 30 usable wide receiver. And it's how quick we forget that.
Right. Exactly. Nice play on that. All right. Finally, our wide receiver bust of the week. John, what do you have as your wide receiver bust of the week?
So wide receiver bust of the week is, I mentioned Courtland Sutton, but I'm going to go with Adam Thielen. I think Adam Thielen is coming off a huge game against New England, which was a tough defense, tough matchup on paper, had good yardage, scored a touchdown. And I think I sat him in a lot of leagues against New England, made me eat my words. But the New York Jets have only given up 120 yard per game to the wide receiver position. So not going to be a big yardage game for sure. And you're really just hoping on a touchdown. So, even on a good stat line, Adam Thielen's going for 45, 50 yards and a score. And that's like his ceiling this week, in my opinion. I think it's going to be a low game, a low passing volume game for Minnesota. I think they're going to try and control the clock against the Jets and run the ball, get Dalvin Cook cooking. They're going to stay away. I think Sauce Gardner's probably going to shadow Justin Jefferson, and it's just going to be, I don't know. Kirk Cousins is, believe in Kirk Cousins breaking a defense is scary. I don't think he can do it. So, Jets have been playing great. Jets have been playing great defensive ball. And I like the Jets to have an upset this week, to be honest.
That would be interesting. I hope they don't, obviously, but that would be.
No. I hope they don't. Listen, I hope they don't too, because they're in division. But I think Minnesota is kind of this is going to sound bad, but they're kind of a fraudulent team, in my opinion. Their record is way better than I think the team is.
I respect it. I like that. All right. Let's see. My one wide receiver bust of the week was Adam Thielen, of course, as well. So you got me right at the end there, John. So I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin, and I call him as a risky flex, as you can see on the PowerPoint there. And I think he is a risky flex. 3 of the last 4 games, he has been under double-digit fantasy points. He doesn't seem like this is an offense where they're running the ball as much. I mean, throwing the ball as much anymore. They're running the ball a ton now. I mean, maybe that changes with Antonio Gibson if he happens to be out. But this Giants defense has been pretty good against the pass this coming season here. They've allowed just one wide receiver over 100 yards this coming season, and it was this past the last time they played against the Cowboys and CeeDee Lamb. And again, they haven't allowed a lot of touchdowns either. And the way that this new offense is playing for the Commanders, it's not a lot of trust that Terry McLaurin can see 120 yards and a touchdown or 80 yards and a touchdown. He's been kind of like 60 yards on 4 catches, and that's not really a lot of fantasy points. And it's not going to help you win your week. So I think if you're looking for a wide receiver, I'd be looking elsewhere this week if I can instead of Terry McLaurin. And I try to go a different direction because I think it's going to be another mediocre performance out of him this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't disagree. I think Terry McLaurin, it's funny, we talked about Courtland Sutton. In my opinion, Terry McLaurin and Courtland Sutton are kind of the same fantasy asset right now. The name value is there. You expect more. They're the one on their team. You want to believe. They show you glimpses of big plays every once in a while, but realistically, they're probably, like you said, a lower ceiling type of play in your flex. And I just don't, 11 points doesn't win you a week. It just doesn't. So right. I'm with you. I like Terry McLaurin as a sit too.
Definitely. All right. So let's see. Let me pull my phone up here real quick, and let's go over some of the players who may not be playing this week real quick and see if maybe we want to play them. So let's start with Rodgers. You said Rodgers. You don't think Rodgers is playing this week. So are you?
Yeah, I don't think.
Are you avoiding the offense and the passing side of the ball? If it's Jordan Love at quarterback.
Yep. It is probably going to be Jordan Love. I think you can still roll your dice with Christian Watson because he is just that, we've talked about it a couple of weeks ago. He's just a freaky athlete that can do a lot with a little. He can take 4 targets and be the number 6 wide receiver on the week. So I think you can take a chance with Christian Watson, but that's about it. I wouldn't start Lazard. I wouldn't start Romeo Dobbs his first week back. I wouldn't start Robert Tonyan. You got to start Aaron Jones. I would probably shy away from AJ Dillon. I think it's really the only 2 are Aaron Jones, and I probably wouldn't start Jordan Love. So really on the Packers side of the ball, it is Christian Watson and Aaron Jones are really kind of the only 2 that I'm interested in.
Right. I like that out there a lot. All right. So let's talk about Travis Etienne. If Travis Etienne doesn't play, are you trusting JaMycal Hasty and maybe Darrell Henderson in a favorable matchup against the Lions?
I know, right? Like you want to, and it's funny. I almost had JaMycal Hasty as one of my sleepers. You want to believe in him against the matchup. You want to believe in him. because the Lions stink against running backs. But I think if ETN is out, we're going to see Trevor Lawrence in this offense open up and throw the ball a lot. I think the Jaguars defense is not good enough to contain the Detroit Lions, which is crazy to say, but the Detroit Lions offense can put up points. I mean, they can do it. So I think this could be a back and forth kind of one of those like, oh, both of these teams are kind of crappy, but it's somehow 28 to 35 at the end of the day. And you're like, whoa, what the hell happened? And you're like, it's no the defenses couldn't stop each other. And it was just, big play after whatever. So I think that if you want to get crazy, throw some DFS lineups with JaMychal Hasty in there, but I'm not trusting him in season long redraft. It's just a tough, because he could just as easily split the backfield with Darrell Henderson, get 10 touches for 46 yards, no score. It's just as easy of a world that he can have that.
Right.
So it's one of those things where if you play him and he blows up, you look like a genius. But that to me is the percentage chance of that is slim. 15% chance he has I'm talking, an 18, 19 point fantasy week. It's just super low odds that's going to happen.
Exactly. Here we go. We have another question here. Should I trade DeAndre Hopkins for Amon-Ra St. Brown and Keenan Allen?
Yeah, I would. I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, I would. Amon-Ra and Keenan Allen are both, it's funny, they're like similar style players. Like they're the possession kind of, guys that the quarterbacks just seem to always love. But they're going to get red zone looks. They're going to get, they're both good for 10 plus targets a week. DeAndre Hopkins is great. They're all three are good players, but I think you're getting some depth leading into the playoffs. You're getting some insurance pieces. If something goes wrong, you can flip to Keenan Allen. You could flip to Amon-Ra. You could, it gives you some roster flexibility. And what's happening with Kyler Murray? Like what's going on there? So DeAndre Hopkins is still going to get his targets, but if it's Colt McCoy, it's not going to be as sexy of an offense. So yeah, I would probably make that trade. I would definitely make that trade.
Yeah, I think I would as well. I mean, it depends on what your team is constructed. If you're looking for another piece that you can rotate in your offense here, you're getting 2 wide receivers that are top 20 potential pretty easily. Mm-hmm. Now, Hopkins might be top 5 potential, honestly. I mean, he has that potential to do something really big this season still, but you're getting 2 guys who are going to be able to put up, 12 plus fantasy points in any given week here. So, I mean, I'm good to make this trade here. It gives you depth and it gives you another player if you're looking to start 2 extra players in your lineup each and every week. So,
and I get why Amon-Ra is probably the one on the block, because the thought of Jameson Williams coming back is scary. So I would check with a lot of Amon-Ra if your trade deadline is this week, or just check on the Amon-Ra manager and just be like, hey man, like, what's the price? because it could be cheaper than you think.
All right, we got Steve here. I don't trust Myers tonight. Should I wait and flex Ayuk, Warren, Pittman, or Knight?
Yes.
I would wait and flex Brandon Ayuk. That's that's the way I'm going.
Yep. I would agree with you. I would probably flex Ayuk because it doesn't seem like Debo is going to go. And yeah, he's just got the most repertoire in this offense.
Tons of passing offense. Miami allows a ton of passing. So
yeah. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Steven. I wouldn't trust Myers tonight, and definitely wait. And probably Ayuk would be the flex at that point.
I mean, I do like Myers personally, but I get because of the injury upside, and I don't know what this offense is going to go through. Brandon Ayuk should have a pretty solid role this coming week here in a very, very favorable matchup in the passing offense, and especially if Debo Samuel doesn't play, Steve. I mean, Brandon Ayuk is going to be in line for at least 8 to 9 targets pretty easily. So I'm okay waiting. It's tough to start a Thursday night player. He already started Ramondre Stevenson, he said. Don't start the Patriots offense. Start
yeah.
Stevenson and go with Brandon Ayuk later on this week.
Yeah, especially if you have Stevenson in there, I wouldn't try and jam Myers in.
Don't trust two Patriots offense players in a quick turnaround. Well, they had a week off, but in a Thursday night matchup. So
yeah.
All right.
No, I know what you mean.
He also needs some upside tonight. Does he play Gabe Davis? If you're looking for upside, absolutely. Gabe Davis could put 25 points up tonight, Steve.
What?
But he also could give you 7. So you're taking that risk.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I love Gabe Davis, and they continue to give him at least 5+ targets each and every single week. And those 5 targets could turn into 150 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
But then it also could turn into 3 for 47 yards.
Yep. Yeah, it's Gabe Davis is such an interesting case study. But you got to play him. You got to play him because you know that there's going to be big weeks.
Only if you need upside. If you
sure. Yeah, you don't need to play
direction.
him. You don't need to play him. But my point is, you're not going to be able to predict. You're not going to be able to predict when the big games happen, but you know that they're going to happen. And so you're rolling the dice. You might get 5 points. You might get 30 points. It's like that's the type of flex player he is. And so think Mike Williams a couple years ago. Remember when Mike Williams was either 15, 16, 17, 18 points, or he was zeros. So
right.
Similar sort of player. And in my opinion, the way I play fantasy, I love flex players that can do that. I love flex players that have the ability, the JD McKissicks of the world, to me, like I would never put them in my flex. Safe, easy options. I would much rather take the chance that Gabe Davis blows up. And if you get your 5 points, so be it. Then you move on and make decisions on your lineup based on Sunday. Luckily, you have Thursday, so you can make pivots Friday, Saturday to adjust for Sunday. So yeah, I would probably Ramondre and Gabe Davis that's a scale. You could be going into Friday with like a 45-point lead, which would be so fun.
It would be great for you, Steve. Hopefully that's the case. I mean, if you're looking for upside, that it makes so much sense to throw Gabe Davis in. If you don't want to take that risk, go safer route. But sometimes in fantasy, you have to take that risk to win it. So. All right, so we're going to wrap things up here tonight, guys. Thank you all for tuning in and posting your questions in the chat. And if you have any more, throw them in before I finish. John, is there anything you want to say before we get going for the night?
I don't. All I want to say is enjoy fantasy. I see a lot of people. This is the time of year and the grind of the season where it really wears people down, and they're like, "Ugh, like week 13, I'm setting lineups again, doing this, doing that." Enjoy it. This should be fun. If you're in the playoffs, if you're out of the playoffs, if you're in the hunt, if you're right in the mix, try and enjoy this process because it is a fun game. And I know we all take it super serious and we all, want to win every week, but it's a game and you should have fun with it and enjoy it. And I know the burnout can be real. So yeah. I feel it sometimes, but just enjoy, just finish strong for the rest of the season, whether you're in the playoffs or not. That's my advice.
Yes, because before you know it, we won't be able to complain about it. So enjoy it while it lasts.
We'll be talking, off-season
March,
topics.
Like, I want to play fantasy so bad.
Yeah. We'll be talking like, where's Tom Brady go next? What happens with, Zach Wilson and all this, and the off-season talk will be crazy, and then the draft season comes around and starts all again.
Exactly. I love it. All right. So guys, thanks y'all for listening. As always, please go check out our website at www.thefantasycoaches.com. I got our articles, we got rankings, we got a playbook up there. I got other episodes up there you can check out as well. As always, please go follow us over on Twitter at Coaches Fantasy. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, we'd appreciate it. Almost to 100. So we would really appreciate it.
Let's get to 100. Come on. I think we're like 2 away. Come on.
Yeah. So help us out here. We'll be on every every Monday and Thursday around the same time here, giving you start and sits and waiver wire advice weekly. And as always, thanks for listening, guys. Until next time, we'll see you Monday. Enjoy your week 13 and have a good one.